I was just trying to reel in a few fish at the neighborhood lake when the homeowners association president slapped me with a $600 penalty. Most people would either hand over the money or drag it into court. But here's what Marjorie Halstead didn't know about me. I had just sold my software company for $8.2 million. So instead of giving in to her absurd fine, I pulled a move that shattered her little empire of control. If you enjoy watching HOA tyrants collapse under their own arrogance, you're going to love this. My name is Daniel Wu, and 3 months ago I was living the dream most entrepreneurs chase for decades. After 15 years of grinding to build a cybersecurity startup, I'd closed a deal with a Fortune 500 company. At 38, I was officially retired, sitting on more money than I could possibly spend. My wife, Elena, and I had just purchased a home in Willowbrook Shores, a gated neighborhood centered around Silvercrest Lake, a 12-acre natural gem that completely sold us on the property. The realtor made sure to highlight fishing as a prime feature of the community. The lake was restocked every year with bass, trout, and sunfish, and included a pier along with a boat launch. For me, someone who had spent his childhood fishing alongside his grandfather, it was perfect. Enter Marjorie Halstead, a 62-year-old former school principal who treated her position as HOA president like she was running a small country. She cruised around in a white Lexus with a vanity plate that literally read, "Sure Qin." I wish I was joking. On a gorgeous Saturday morning in September, I was an hour into my weekend routine at the community pier. I had just landed a solid base and was snapping a quick photo when I heard sharp footsteps coming up behind me. "Excuse me, sir. I need a word with you right now." Marjorie was striding toward me, clipboard in hand, dressed like she'd stepped out of a self-made uniform. Tan slacks, a polo with the HOA logo, and a plastic badge that read Neighborhood Authority. 2 other board members followed close behind. "Morning," I greeted her cheerfully. "Beautiful day to be out fishing." Her face could have turned the water to ice. "Mr. Wu, fishing from this community dock is a violation of the newly adopted rules. I am issuing you an official citation for unapproved recreational activity." I blinked at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "The realtor specifically told us fishing was one of the amenities here. That's why we bought this house." Marjorie flipped through her clipboard with theatrical flair. "The guidelines were amended last month at an emergency board session. Fishing presents liability concerns and disrupts residents who value quiet lake meditation." She waved her hand toward the water, where not a single soul was sitting in lotus pose. "I never got any notice about this supposed change," I said, my irritation starting to surface. "All homeowners were notified through the community portal," Marjorie replied smugly. "Not knowing the rules doesn't excuse you from following them. The fine is $600. $600 for fishing in a lake that my HOA fees already go toward maintaining?" I said incredulously. "That's excessive. Isn't there an appeal process?" Her smile dripped with superiority. "Mr. Wu, perhaps you don't fully grasp how Willowbrook Shores operates. We preserve standards here. The board takes every infraction seriously, particularly when it comes from newer residents who may not fully respect our established culture." Her deliberate stress on newer residents carried the real message loud and clear. This wasn't about fishing at all. It was about putting the new homeowner in his place. "Payment is due within 30 days, she said crisply. "Otherwise, we'll file a lien against your property." "I trust you won't force us to escalate." As her little entourage marched off, I sat there on the pier and made up my mind. I wasn't paying this fine. I had a far more intriguing idea. That afternoon, I picked up the phone and called Thomas Keller, my real estate attorney who had handled the sale of my company. "Tom, I need you to dig into something for me. Who actually owns Silvercrest Lake?" 3 days later, he rang me back with a revelation. "Daniel, the HOA doesn't own the lake at all. It's still legally held by Horizon Development Group, the original builders from 25 years ago. The HOA only leases management rights, and that lease expires in 6 weeks. Now things were getting interesting. "And when that lease runs out?" I asked. "They can either renew, sell it to the HOA, or unload it privately. Horizon has been trying to exit property management altogether, so odds are the lake is for sale." For the first time since meeting Marjorie, I grinned. Find out what Horizon is asking. While Thomas worked his contacts, I dove into research on Marjorie's so-called leadership. What I found was a goldmine. 8 years, worth of complaints littered online forums, stories of arbitrary punishments, outrageous fees, and outright abuse of authority. She had driven family after family to sell and move out, each time tightening her grip. The most damning evidence was buried in public records. Somehow her own relatives consistently dodged citations, despite obvious violations. Her son had constructed a deck without permits. Her daughter ran an unlicensed pet grooming operation out of her garage, yet none of that had ever made it onto Marjorie's precious clipboard. A week later, Thomas called again with the numbers I'd been waiting for. Horizon is motivated. They're asking $340,000 for the lake, along with all associated property rights, the pier, the boat launch, and 2 acres of shoreline. $340,000. I'd made more than that in interest just last month. Make them an offer they can't walk away from, I told Thomas. Cash deal. 2-day closing. I'll pay $400,000 if the paperwork is ready by Friday. He hesitated. Are you certain? That's serious money for a lake. But I was already visualizing the next move. Sometimes you spend for real estate, and sometimes you spend for principal. This was both. By Thursday morning, we signed the closing papers at Thomas's office. By noon, Silvercrest Lake belonged entirely to me. The HOA had no clue that their crown jewel had just slipped through their fingers. Friday morning, I was back at my usual fishing spot when Marjorie appeared on her weekend patrol. Clipboard in hand, posture stiff, her expression was pure authority. Mr. Wu, she announced, continuing to violate community rules constitutes a second offense. The fine now rises to $1,200. Further defiance will force the board to escalate. I calmly reeled in my line, set my rod aside, and gave her my warmest smile. Marjorie, I have some interesting news for you. As of yesterday, I'm the legal owner of Silvercrest Lake, the dock, the boat launch, the surrounding land, and every fish swimming here are now my private property. The color drained from her face. That's impossible. The HOA controls all community amenities. I pulled out my phone and showed her the deed transfer. The HOA only had a lease, which expired yesterday. Horizon Development sold rather than renew. I made them an offer they liked. Her clipboard trembled in her grip. You can't just buy community property. There are protections. Actually, no, I replied pleasantly. Thomas researched it thoroughly. The lake was never community property. It was leased access. That lease ended, and as the new owner, I'm making a few adjustments. I gestured toward the water. Effective immediately, this is private land. No fishing, no swimming, no boating, and no dock access for Willowbrook residents. Security cameras go up next week to ensure compliance. Marjorie looked like she might faint. You can't do this! Our residents pay HOA dues to cover lake maintenance. Not anymore, I said smoothly. The dues covered lease payments to Horizon. Now that I own it, that expense disappears. In fact, those fees should probably be reduced. Maybe bring that up at your next board meeting. I began packing my gear, then added, oh, and about that $600 fine. I expect a formal letter withdrawing it, along with written apologies for every resident you harassed with your bogus fishing citations. You have until Monday. As I walked away, I could hear her frantically dialing. Someone, probably her attorney, while the board members scrambled to understand how their precious lake had just been bought, out from under them. The calls started almost immediately. My phone rang nonstop that week. Board members, furious residents, Marjorie's lawyer, everyone wanted to negotiate. Some begged for fishing rights. Others pleaded for boat launch access. Some residents even floated profit-sharing deals. But the call that truly made me grin came Tuesday evening from Marjorie herself. Mr. Wu, she whispered, there may have been a misunderstanding regarding your fishing citation. The board has voted to rescind all lake-related fines and reinstate fishing as a community amenity. Interesting, Marjorie, I said evenly. But you don't control lake access anymore, I do. The silence on the line dragged for nearly a full minute. Then finally she asked the question I'd been waiting for. What would it take to restore lake access for the community? I had my answer ready. First, a written apology from the board admitting the fishing ban was arbitrary and unjust. Second, the creation of a formal appeals process for all HOA violations. Third, a rule that no future regulation can take effect without 60 days. Notice and input from residents. If those conditions are met, I'll deed the lake back as true common property, owned by the community itself, not leased land that can vanish overnight. Marjorie agreed to everything. The apology letter arrived the very next day. Within a week, an appeals process was up and running, and the era of sudden, heavy-handed rule changes ended immediately. 2 months later, I signed the papers transferring Silvercrest Lake into the Willowbrook Shores Community Trust, guaranteeing that no future Marjorie could yank it away from the residents who paid to live here. I still fish there every Saturday. Marjorie still lives in the neighborhood, but she's no longer president of the HOA. Turns out the other board members weren't thrilled about losing a community, treasure to one woman's petty power trip. And the best part? That $600 fine proved something unforgettable. The most expensive lessons in life aren't always the ones you actually pay.